End of the year is finally here, which means it's time to dive in and rank every 2023 comic book movie from worst to best. Now, I have not seen everything that might validate into this, but I've seen at least 10 comic book movies this year, and it's going to be fun to dive into this list. So make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Rank every 2023 comic book movie you watched this year. And if you want to throw some shows in there, feel free to do so. But without further ado, let's get into this list. And coming out of my number 10 is not just the last comic book movie of the year, it is the final DCEU film, and that is Aquaman 2: The Lost Kingdom. A movie that honestly just really disappointed me. As a fan of the first Aquaman movie, I expected so much more from this film, and I sadly came out of it just disappointed. An overall mixed bag that might have enjoyable moments to it, but really much lacks so much love and luster to it. And for me, the biggest key word I came out of feeling on this movie was substance. This movie is lacking a gigantic amount of substance in terms of the world building, the mythology. Just like the original Aquaman had, this one is missing. Now, it's not to say that this movie is complete garbage. There is some pros to be found in. Orm and Aquaman's relationship is hands down the best part about the film, alongside James Wan's directing of the action sequences. That man still cooks to there. This is a visual delight, but when I say visual, I also mean that in general, this is visual noise. I didn't care what was going on in this story. Everything is so surface level, and I really expected a bit more from this film. Now we get into my number 9, which is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which going into this year was one of my most anticipated films. I thought there is no way this could be bad, and oh god, it's bad. In fact, this is the only MCU movie as of right now that I do not own on Blu-ray. I will buy every Marvel movie first day. I didn't buy this one first day. I didn't care to. I found this movie forgettable. I think it's kind of on par with Aquaman 2 in a lot of instances, but the only thing that kind of held it above everything else was I thought the villain was better. And that's about it. I think Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania has enjoyable moments, just as Aquaman did. But at the same time, its ramifications for the MCU and what it was trying to set up just didn't execute completely well. In fact, my biggest disappointment about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is the way that they set up Kang. I think Kang is one of the coolest villains, and he's defeated by ants! Dear God! I could go on and on for days on why Ant-Man and the Wasp really much disappointed me, but I think other reasoning is some of the visual effects are poor. I think the film feels a little bit too big for what it was trying to do. I think MODOK is actually kind of fun, but in a bad way. This is just a movie that has not grown well on me. And I can understand where some people might have fun with the sci-fi flair and the action adventure, and I can understand what Peyton Reed was going for, but I don't think there's a good mix here. I think the action is just not memorable, and I think when you look at the Ant-Man franchise as a whole, the biggest piece that it's always had is heart and humor. And yes, this film has parts of that. But if you want this to be, hey, Kang is this big threat, then the end of the film should have established that, and they really just play it off as a joke, and it didn't work well for me. And I think Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is one of the films that has not sat well with me this entire year. But now coming in at my number 8 is actually a film that's probably a lot lower on a lot of your guys' list, and that's The Marvels. I like this one a little bit more than most. I thought this was a decently good movie, but it also has a hell of a ton of issues. And I mean, just rewatching it at least once, I've seen the film twice, the film has countless issues in terms of, again, substance, surface level, all those things like that, like Aquaman had. But the thing that saves it is the 3 female leads. I think their chemistry, everything about them is the most enjoyable part of the film. And I think seeing their action set pieces, those were awesome. The whole thing with the Marvels, though, and I think I'm a little bit more towards it, is the fact that Kamala Khan is in this. And Kamala Khan, for me, just is one of the shining spots of the MCU right now. And for every big issue that the Marvels had, I always felt that the 3 leading ladies always pushed it to that next stratosphere, always pushed it to that next edge and made it better. I like Brie Larson a lot more in the Captain Marvel role here. I don't like how they wrote her completely, but I still like how she's portraying it. Kamala Khan, same thing. Amala Vellani, incredible. I think she's great in this role. And then Tiana Paris, who I think is great as, of course, Monica Rambeau. Them three come together in such a great way that saves this entire movie. The movie is lost in a lot of the editing, and I think there's a lot of sequences and story beats that really feel like they needed more time to cook. In fact, I've really seen this really much, especially on a second rewatch, I noticed this. It seems like there was a big plot in here, like a Captain Marvel 2 that should have came before this, and we never got it, so you learn it through exposition. It's a very surface level movie, but it's one that I enjoy. Will I buy it first day on Blu-ray? I can't say that I will since Blu-rays are expensive, but I still enjoyed it, and I wouldn't mind watching this one again. We get into my number 7, which is Shazam! Fury of the Gods. This movie has not held up all too much from watching it in the theaters. Now, I'm a little bit more biased towards Shazam for 3 different reasons. I'll get these out of the way. 1, Shazam's one of my favorite superheroes of all time. 2, the first Shazam movie was me and my fiance's first date of all time. So going to see Shazam 2 with her at a press screening was honestly really enjoyable for both of us, and to have that experience and specifically come this far, it put a smile on my face. And 3, I like Zachary Levi. I know a lot of people have been giving him shit. He made Chuck. He was Chuck. If you watch that show, I'm biased towards that. So Shazam! Fury of the Gods just needed to deliver that good Shazam fun. And it gave me that with more mythical creatures and monsters and a giant dragon, and that's about all I wanted from this. I do not think it's even close to as how good the original Shazam was. I think the original Shazam is one of my favorite comic book films of all time. I think this film needed a lot more to get to that point. I think it's a little messy in terms of storytelling and certain things that with Shazam and the Shazam family. And while I like that we get the whole Shazam family in here, part of me kind of wish that it was just more of a Shazam-centered story. But I had fun. That's all that matters when you go to the movies. And Shazam! Fury of the Gods, I think, could have been better, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. Now we get into my number 6, which is Blue Beetle. This was a surprise. Not because I didn't think it would be good, but because of how damn good this movie was. Blue Beetle is just an energetic, chemistry-filled, charisma-filled time at the movies that might have a very simple story that relates back to some of the earlier days of early 2000 comic book movies, not in a bad way, just very a generic, simple story that you've seen before. But the thing that holds it above its own is, first off, the action sequences are awesome. They borrow a lot of elements from Injustice 2, which is my favorite fighting game of all time, so count me in for that. Second, Xolo is incredible as Blue Beetle. I think he really much brings about this character of Blue Beetle in Jaime Reyes, and I'm so excited to see the future of this character, and I'm really happy that they are going to be keeping him around in the DC universe. And on top of that all, the last bit is, of course, the family. The family aspect of Blue Beetle is one of the strongest parts. In very small little instances where you go to see a movie, such as Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse, that family element between his parents, to along the likes of other films, Blue Beetle is one of those that kind of just has this winning energy because of the family and because of how personal it feels. And George Lopez is absolutely hilarious in this. So I overall really enjoyed Blue Beetle. I would have liked a little bit more from it in terms of the villain in the story, but I can't deny that I had a blast with this, and I've really thought about Blue Beetle quite a bit ever since I saw it. We get into my number 5, which I think a lot of you guys will have this a lot lower on your list. I'm going to be defending this movie. I'm ready to fight you guys about it, but I also understand if you didn't enjoy it, and that is The Flash. This is probably the most surprising movie of this year for me in just terms of how much I actually enjoyed it. I say that because I was never looking forward to this movie, and that hurts me to even say that I was never looking forward to this, but there's a lot of reasons for that. All the drama behind the scenes, all the dramas with the actors, all the pushbacks, and honestly, I had heard a lot about the movie specifically from people that have worked on the film, and it turned out incredibly way better than I thought. What this film delivered was exactly what I wanted from a Barry Allen story, in terms of having a Michael Keaton Batman show up, in terms of having a Supergirl show up, in terms of kind of going back in time and having to screw around with the DCEU and everything of that nature. And The Flash delivered that, but it also delivered an emotional story about a son and a mother that really choked me up, specifically in its final moments. And I think this film does have a lot of issues, in terms of visual effects, in terms of some messy storytelling devices, but it is one that is filled with so much nostalgia for me. And I'm not just talking about because you see like Nicolas Cage's Superman and shit like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking nostalgia purely for me. For me, someone who grew up with a Michael Keaton Batman and enjoying the shit out of that. And growing up with comic books like Barry Allen and loving that character so much. And then now getting, growing up with Tim Burton type-esque stuff. And the best way that I frame it is the Flash feels like Andy Muschietti was channeling his inner child, his inner childlike nature, and remembering what a Tim Burton film was to him and him recreating that within the Flash, making it feel like a film that Tim Burton would have made back in the day, but it's his own Flash movie. And to have that feeling was beyond belief. I mean, this really does feel like something Tim Burton would have made. And I loved it because of that. I loved it because of that nostalgic feel I had. I loved it because of the emotion there. And I think The Flash deserved a little bit better than it actually gave. But I overall really dug this movie, and I've rewatched it quite a bit through this entire year. Now we get into my top 4. And 4 and on, these are, I'm not lying, some of my favorite films of this year. And you're going to get my top 10 list very soon. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on that. I think I'm planning to post the day after Christmas. So again, you guys are in store for the goods. But coming in at my number 4 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. I cannot believe how great this movie was. In fact, this is my favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie of all time. It is not a guilty pleasure, but a comfort movie for me to just pop in, enjoy the vibes, the music, the aesthetic, the score, all of it just nailed in exactly what I wanted. My only issue with the movie is I wish it was longer. I wish it gave us just more time with the Turtles. I think the movie's just a tad bit too short. But other than that, the animation, I love the choice to make it as an animation of like, what if kids drew all these characters and then they developed it and made their own thing. You can see that from all the different designs. On top of that, I love the fact that Seth Rogen went out there and got children to voice the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, actual teenagers. And you can see that within their banter, within their conversations. This is just one of those movies that oozes with so much fun. And it really reminded me of why I love the Ninja Turtles so much. I love the way that they infuse all the different mutants. I think it's a little bit weird that Bebop and Rocksteady by the end of this film were, not bad guys and really never bad guys. But I love what they did with Superfly. I think they did a kind of nice twist on the Fly villains from the original one, like Baxter Stockman. And I just love this interpretation of the Turtles. In fact, to the point where Donatello is usually my least favorite. And in this one, I think he was my favorite. So I can't wait to rewatch this one. I'm probably going to rewatch it again this week before the end of the year. We get into my number 3, and this is the most interesting one on this list because a lot of you guys might not know that this is based on a graphic novel, comic book. It's all the same shit to me. But this is David Fincher's The Killer. This movie is, weirdly enough, probably my most rewatched movie of this year. I think I've seen this movie at this point 6 or 7 times. I just love this movie to every single delight. And I think it's such, again, many people say it's a simple David Fincher film, and I think that's okay. That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted the day of a hitman. And that's what I got, but it's actually, in fact, his worst week of his life he's ever had. And I think the movie is weirdly funny at times. I think it has this dark, sensational humor to it. Specifically, just in that opening sequence, I lost it at just what occurs. But seeing him kind of go through the motions to perform and act revenge and do certain things and how he sets up these things, it's kind of scary because it makes you go, yeah, anyone could be doing this the way that he's doing it. And it's like they even teach you. But it's David Fincher. He's cold and calculated. And I found The Killer to be a perfect movie. I mean, in every single way. If you're looking at the sound design especially, there are certain sequences in here that when I got to see this movie in theaters, I was just blown away. One of my favorite sequences in the entire year, and probably one of my favorite action sequences of all time, is the fight sequence. I think they're in Florida, and it's all in this house, and again, that sound design paired with the fight choreograph, and even surprisingly the dark cinematography where you can actually see what's going on. It is so visceral, it's so brutal, it's so on the edge, and David Fincher just coldly calculated such a perfect sequence, and honestly calculated an entirely perfect film. There's certain choices that I still am kind of pondering to myself of what he had made throughout this, specifically for the main character, but Michael Fassbender is absolutely incredible, and I highly recommend The Killer. Now we get into my number 2, and it is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, my personal favorite MCU film of all time. Is it the best one? Maybe not, but the reason it is my personal favorite one is because it ended in such a perfect way. I'm still reliving that final dance sequence. I'm still reliving the entire Dog Days Are Over sequence, and every time I hear that song, I get pretty damn emotional. Just one of those movies that, when you look at the entire trilogy, and you look at every time we ever saw the Guardians, it's built up in a perfect way to end this franchise, to end these characters. And I didn't think they would be able to do that. I didn't think that James Gunn would be able to perfect that, coming off Guardians 2, which I thought was a little bit weaker. But what Guardians 3 does is it's not just my favorite out of the trilogy. It makes you look back at every other time you ever saw the Guardians. In the first film, the second film, the Christmas special, or even the 2 times they're in the Avengers. And it makes you look at those and go, wow, it actually enhances those movies. It enhances those moments, and it enhances those characters. Because now you can go back and watch those and know where those characters are going to end up at. And find yourself getting into an emotional wreck. And I really find that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 delivers on that. Delivers in really emotional stakes, great action, and formulates to the reason why Rocket Raccoon is my personal favorite MCU character. And I think an argument to be made that he is the best MCU character. I think it's between him and Loki in the overall discussion when you look at everything that's happened inside the MCU, but Guardians of the Galaxy was everything that I wanted it to be and more. And this is one of the most rewatched films of the year for me. I cannot stop watching it and cannot stop thinking about it. And number 1 of this year is one of the best films that I've ever seen in my entire life. In fact, it is in my top 10 of all time now, and that is Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. I didn't think they would be able to do it. And I say that is because Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse might be one of my most rewatched movies of all time. It's a comfort movie. I just put it on and enjoy it. The animation shocked me. It was my favorite film the year it came out. It was the most surprising film that year as well, because I always rolled my eyes at the fact of it. Miles Morales animated Spider-Man movie. Why are we just not doing live action? And I sat there in utter disbelief when I saw Into the Spider-Verse, and I sat there in utter disbelief and a staggering disbelief of Across the Spider-Verse and what they accomplished. As the Empire Strikes Back of Spider-Man and comic book movies, where the film ends and it's a giant cliffhanger leaving us wondering what's going to happen next. And I think that's completely okay. But the entire character development, the entire story, the way that it takes place and starts us with Gwen and ends on Gwen, I think is such a meaningful and a unique way to end the film. But it's throughout the entire story, not just specifically what they're able to do in story context and play off the entire Spiderverse and Spider-Man films that have come before, and how there's these things called canon events and make the multiverse not seem confusing. It also goes on top to the animation, which is just, I've said it, that if I would have seen this film as a kid, this would be my favorite film of all time. This would be the film that I grew up rewatching, and this is going to be the film that many kids grow up rewatching, and I think that's the coolest experience that they get to have. And when you look at the animation and how everything is just moving at once, and you have all these different characters with different animation and different styles and different rates per second, like Spider-Punk, who I think was, again, one of the biggest surprises. I loved Hobby in here. The humor, the emotion, all of that just really brought to a sensational conclusion. And what else is sensational about this is Daniel Pepperman's score and Metro Boomin's soundtrack. All of that combined to, again, make one of the best movies ever made. One of the best animated movies I've ever made, and I absolutely love Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This is another one of those I'm planning to rewatch before the end of the year just because it's that damn good. It's such a shocking film, and it's one of the films that have just inspired me and reevaluated my love of movies. So it's the best comic book film of this year. Once the third film comes out, if it's just as good as the other two, I think we can claim that the Spider-Verse trilogy is the best trilogy of all time. That's saying a lot. That's my personal opinion. But thank you so much again, guys, for watching this. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Look out for a lot more movies content coming up over the next couple of days. I have a top 10 best list coming out soon. I have a ranking of every TV show I've watched this year. I have a ranking of every video game I've played this year. We're going to talk about my most anticipated films for next year and also the most underrated films of this year. You are not going to want to miss out. Thank you so much again for watching. And of course, until next time, stay classy.